Let me tell you something that most people will never hear. Not in schools, not in churches, not in textbooks, not even in most spiritual circles. And yet, it's the most important truth you will ever come to realize. You were never meant to be normal. You were never meant to fit in. You were born set apart not because you are better, but because you are different. And that difference is not a glitch in your design. It's the blueprint of your purpose. It's the mark of the chosen elite. And whether you know it yet or not, if you're watching this, chances are you're one of them. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. You were chosen before you were born. Not by man, not by society, but by Source itself. You didn't just randomly appear here. You volunteered. You incarnated into this timeline, into this body, into these exact circumstances with a mission coded in your soul. A mission most people can't see. A mission so ancient, so sacred, that it had to be hidden in plain sight. That's why you feel so different. That's why nothing ever quite made sense the way it was taught to you. That's why no matter how hard you've tried to be normal, something inside you always pulled you away from the crowd. That pull, that was your spirit remembering who it is. So now I have to ask you a question. Not a surface level question, a question that will either shake you or awaken you. When did you first know you were here for more, not more money, not more success, but something deeper, something bigger, something that couldn't be explained but also couldn't be ignored? Because that knowing, that quiet, persistent inner whisper, that was the first sign, the first sacred clue. And you didn't imagine it. You didn't fabricate it. That was forbidden knowledge breaking through the veil of your memory. And so we begin.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first early sign proving you're part of the chosen elite is this. You've always felt like an outsider. Not because people hated you, not because you were a failure, but because your frequency was incompatible with the matrix from the beginning. While others chased validation, you craved truth. While others molded themselves to fit the system, you quietly questioned the system itself. You saw through the facade. You noticed the patterns. You sensed the inauthenticity. And deep down, you didn't just think something was off, you knew it. This knowing wasn't intellectual. It was energetic. It was cellular. It was ancient. And no one gave it to you. You came into this world with it. That's why the roles never fit. That's why the masks never felt right. That's why you could be in a room full of people and feel completely alone, because your soul was never here to blend in. It was here to awaken from within. And awakening always begins with separation. That's why the chosen elite are often placed in families, schools, environments where they feel like they don't belong. It's not punishment, it's preparation. The universe had to isolate you so it could activate you. Because you cannot rise if you're still entangled in the illusions you came to dissolve. The second sign is even deeper. You have an unexplainable sensitivity to energy, emotion, and vibration. You feel things others don't. You absorb moods, atmospheres, even unspoken thoughts. You walk into rooms and your body reacts before your mind does. You've probably been called too sensitive. You've probably been told to toughen up. But what the world called weakness is actually your superpower. Because sensitivity is perception. Sensitivity is access. Sensitivity is spiritual intelligence. And the chosen are always sensitive not to be overwhelmed, but to decode the unseen layers of reality. You're not crazy. You're tuned in. You're not too emotional. You're empathic. You're not weak. You're wired for divine reception. Your nervous system is more open. Your heart is more porous. Your soul is more connected. And that's why you feel other people's pain as if it's your own. That's why you cry at beauty. That's why injustice makes your whole body ache. Because you weren't sent here to ignore suffering. You were sent here to heal it, to transcend it, to transform it from the inside out. But this gift comes with a cost, doesn't it? Because the third sign is one that shapes your life in ways no one else sees. You've experienced deep pain, loss, or betrayal early in your life. Not just once, not just lightly, but in ways that broke you open, in ways that forced you to question everything, in ways that shattered the illusions and left you standing face to face with the void. And in that void, something sacred happened. Something no one else may have noticed. Something that changed you forever. You woke up. You saw the world for what it was. You saw through the masks people wear. You felt the falseness in their voices, their smiles, their promises. And instead of hardening, you softened. Instead of closing, you opened. And that opening? That's where the divine slipped in. That's where the codes of remembrance started activating. Because here's the forbidden truth. Your pain was not random, it was initiation. The chosen elite are not chosen because their lives are easy. They're chosen because they are strong enough to carry divine codes through the fire. They are tested not to break, but to refine. They are stripped not to suffer, but to remember what is real. And you have passed through that fire. You're still here. You're still seeking. You're still listening. That alone proves you are different. The fourth sign is subtle, but undeniable. You have a constant inner battle between surrender and control. Part of you wants to let go, to trust the path, and to live from flow and faith. But another part of you clings, fights, resists, tries to make sense of things that cannot be explained. This isn't a flaw, this is the spiritual tension of a soul that remembers its power but is still unlearning its programming. You were taught to control to survive, but you were born to surrender to thrive. And the chosen elite must learn this lesson before they can step into their mission. Because your mission will not unfold the way you plan. It will unfold the way your soul planned. And if you cling too tightly to logic, to timelines, to expectations, you will miss the miracles. You will miss the synchronicities. You will miss the divine detours that are not delays, but upgrades. So the real mastery is not in controlling everything, it's in trusting yourself, no matter what happens. Trusting that every loss was alignment, that every rejection was protection, that every delay was divine design. And that's not easy, but that is the path of the chosen. And finally, the fifth sign, the one that seals it all. You've always felt called to something greater, but you can't fully explain what it is. You feel it in your bones, in your dreams, in your meditations. In those quiet moments when no one's watching and your soul whispers, you were made for more. Not more fame, Not more attention, but more purpose, more service, more impact. And the truth is, you're not crazy for feeling this way. You're not delusional. You're not arrogant. You're remembering. You're remembering the mission you agreed to before this lifetime. The one you wrote into your soul contract. The one that has been calling you since childhood. And you don't need to know all the details yet. You just need to say yes. You just need to trust the pull, to follow the thread, to keep showing up even when it makes no sense, because the mission will reveal itself through your obedience to your inner knowing. And if you're still here, still listening, still watching, still feeling this, then you already know. You are part of the chosen elite, and the world is about to remember who you are. But first, there's one more secret. One more forbidden truth that no one talks about until you're ready. And now that you've remembered the signs, now that you've felt the resonance, now that you've seen yourself in every word, you are ready. You are ready to learn why the universe separated you from everything you once knew. You are ready to understand the sacred isolation, because what comes next will explain everything. There is a moment in the life of every chosen one where everything begins to fall apart and we are tempted to believe we've been abandoned. The friends disappear. The support vanishes. The conversations grow shallow. The invitations stop coming. Suddenly, the places we once felt comfort in start to feel foreign. We look around and feel like aliens in our own lives. The world keeps spinning, but we're no longer part of its rhythm. This is the moment where many break. But those who endure, those who feel the ache and still don't go back, discover the truth. Few ever live long enough to realize that what you thought was rejection was actually redirection. What you thought was isolation was actually initiation. The universe didn't forget you. It selected you. And now it's preparing you not for comfort, but for greatness. You see, when the universe is about to elevate someone into their divine mission, it doesn't start by placing them on a stage. It starts by pulling them away from the noise. It starts by stripping them of their attachments, because the chosen cannot carry the old world with them into the new reality they're meant to build. That's why your life fell apart. That's why the relationships collapsed. That's why the job ended, the friends ghosted, the family didn't understand. Not because you did something wrong, but because you were being unplugged from the matrix you were never meant to anchor into. The sacred isolation isn't punishment, it's purification. It's the divine cocoon that forms around a soul when it's time to undergo metamorphosis. A kind of death, but not of your body, of your identity. The false one. The one shaped by fear, expectation, programming, illusion. That version of you had to be deconstructed so the real you could emerge. And the only way that emergence can happen is in solitude. Have you ever wondered why your darkest nights came right before your biggest shifts? Why the silence became deafening just before the breakthrough? It's because growth never happens in the spotlight. It happens in the shadows, in the quiet spaces where no one is watching, where the applause is absent, and the only voice left to listen to is your own. That's when the old self starts to fade. That's when the higher self starts to speak. And though it feels like you've been forgotten, what's actually happening is that you're being recalibrated to a higher frequency, a frequency that cannot be accessed when you're surrounded by noise, distraction, or people who are not aligned with your future. This is the part no one prepares you for. When your gifts begin to awaken, but no one around you can relate. When you start to see numbers, symbols, patterns, when your dreams become messages, your thoughts become manifestations, and your senses become portals. And the more you try to explain it, the more people look at you like you're broken. But you're not broken. You're ahead of your time, ahead of their understanding. And that's why the universe pulls you back, not to hide you, but to refine you. Because if you were to step fully into your light too early, without the anchoring of solitude, you'd either burn out or dim yourself to match a world that isn't ready. So the isolation continues. The silence deepens. And in that silence, something extraordinary happens. You begin to hear your soul for the first time. You begin to realize that you were never truly alone, only disconnected from the divine intelligence that has been guiding you all along. And once you hear that voice, once you feel that presence, you stop craving the noise. You stop needing the validation. You stop chasing the crowd. Because you realize that everything you were searching for outside of you was waiting for you inside. That's the moment you begin to shift. That's the moment you go from trying to escape your path to embodying it. You start seeing the signs not as coincidences, but as confirmations. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this preparing me for?" That question is your turning point. That question is the language of the awakened. And as you begin to rise, you'll notice something else. People start to return, but not the ones you lost. New ones, aligned ones, souls who see you without needing to explain you. Those you were always meant to walk with, but couldn't meet while you were still pretending to be someone you're not. The sacred isolation was never about keeping you alone forever. It was about aligning your frequency so that when your tribe arrives, you recognize each other instantly, soul to soul. And when that happens, you'll look back at the solitude not as suffering, but as the most sacred chapter of your life. The chapter where you stopped being who the world told you to be and started becoming who you were born to be. But let me ask you something now, something only the chosen can answer honestly. Are you willing to keep walking even when no one claps for you? Even when you're misunderstood, misjudged, isolated? Are you willing to protect your energy like it's sacred currency, even if it means saying no to people you once loved? Even if it means walking away from everything familiar to step into the unknown? Because that's what it takes. That's what the sacred path demands. Not fame, not followers, not comfort, but devotion. Relentless, unwavering devotion to the truth inside you, no matter what it costs. And when you say yes to that, when your yes is louder than your fear, you unlock the next level of your evolution. You begin to access divine remembrance. You begin to receive downloads not just for your life, but for the collective. You become a vessel, a conduit, a bridge between dimensions. You start to speak not from ego, but from source. And your very presence becomes medicine. You don't need to preach. You don't need to convince. You just exist in alignment, and the world around you begins to shift. People feel calmer around you, more awake, more seen. They don't know why, but they leave you different, lighter. That's not coincidence. That's resonance. That's the result of the work you did in secret, the work you did in isolation, the work no one applauded but the universe rewarded. And now you're ready to step out, not as the old you, but as the initiated you, the aligned you, the chosen you. You don't return to the world to be swallowed by it. You return to illuminate it. That's what the sacred isolation was preparing you for. That's why the doors closed. That's why the silence stretched. That's why everything was stripped away. Because the universe had to make sure you would never again forget who you are. And now you remember, not just with your mind, but with your being. You remember the truth you carried before this life. You remember the reason you were born into this timeline. You remember the frequency of your soul tribe. And most of all, you remember that you were never alone. You were being prepared. You were being initiated. You were being called. And now the call is louder than ever. Because what comes next is not just about remembrance. It's about reclamation. It's about stepping into your divine authority. It's about unlocking the ancient codes that have been sleeping in your DNA, waiting for this exact moment in time. You've passed the tests. You've survived the fire. You've walked through the silence. And now you're ready to awaken the codes. There comes a point in your awakening where solitude has done its sacred work, where you are no longer begging the world to see you, and instead, you begin to see yourself not just as a human on a spiritual journey, but as a multidimensional being encoded with frequencies, missions, and memories that stretch beyond the stars. This is the threshold where remembrance turns into embodiment, and embodiment becomes activation. This is where the ancient truth begins to rise, not from books, not from teachers, but from your own biology. Because what the world has long forgotten, what was buried under centuries of control, fear, and distortion, is that your DNA is not just a string of genetic information, it is a living library of divine design. It holds the keys to your power, your purpose, and your cosmic origin. And once you are ready, truly ready, the codes begin to rise inside you like a sleeping giant awakening from 1,000-year slumber. You begin to feel them as subtle tremors in your being, vibrations in your spine, sparks in your fingertips, heat in the center of your chest when you speak the truth. You begin to dream in symbols. You begin to hear whispers of languages you don't remember learning. You start to feel like you're remembering not just who you are, but what you are, and that memory changes everything. And here's the forbidden knowledge most people never access. Only the chosen are called to awaken the dormant codes buried in their DNA. And when those codes activate, nothing in your life stays the same. You start to reject anything that is not aligned. You feel physical discomfort when you lie to yourself. You cannot tolerate inauthenticity, distraction, or shallow living. You become highly sensitive to food, media, people, environments, not because you're fragile, but because you're becoming refined. Your entire system is recalibrating to hold more light, more frequency, more divine intelligence. You are no longer operating as a 3D egoic self. You are becoming a galactic architect, someone who is here to shape the future not through force, but through frequency. And the more you surrender to that evolution, the more your reality begins to shift. You start to manifest not from vision boards, but from embodied resonance. You start to attract not just people, but missions, soul contracts, synchronicities that are so precise you cannot call them coincidence anymore. Your life becomes a dance with the quantum field. You speak and reality responds. You align and timelines collapse. You choose and entire dimensions rearrange themselves to reflect your new frequency. That is the power of activated DNA. That is the gift of the chosen elite. But this activation requires more than desire. It requires devotion. You cannot microwave this process. You must live it. You must undergo the purification of your vessel, the refinement of your ego, the surrender of your false security. You must make your body a sacred temple, not because it's trendy or aesthetic, but because your body is the interface through which the divine expresses itself. Every breath is a signal. Every thought is a code. Every emotion is energy in motion, either unlocking or blocking your divine potential. And the chosen understand this on a level that most never will. That's why we eat differently. That's why we wake up in the middle of the night. That's why we speak less, but say more. That's why we don't chase, because we magnetize. We don't hustle because we anchor. We don't perform because we remember. This remembrance is not ego, it is essence. It is not arrogance, it is alignment. And when you live from that place, you begin to wield a power that cannot be bought, taught, or faked. It is the raw, radiant power of a soul that has come online. Let me tell you this now, and let it land deep. You are not just here to awaken, you are here to build the new earth. You are here to lay the foundations of a reality that does not yet exist. You are here to break generational curses, rewrite ancestral patterns, activate dormant light grids embedded in the land, and speak words that haven't been heard on this planet in thousands of years. You are not just a healer. You are not just a guide. You are a galactic architect, and your DNA is the blueprint. Every mystical experience, every emotional purge, every timeline collapse, every loss, every burst of intuition, every quantum leap, it's all part of a larger orchestration preparing you to step into that role. And when you do, you stop asking for proof. You stop needing permission. You stop waiting to be discovered. Because you realize you are the one you've been waiting for. You don't just channel higher beings, you become one. You don't just follow guidance, you are the guidance. You don't just talk about light, you become the light, so embodied, so clear, so unwavering, that others remember who they are simply by being in your field. And now I must ask you the deepest question of all, one that only your soul can answer. Are you ready to live as the version of yourself your higher self has always seen? Not someday, not when it's easy, not when you're fully healed, but now, because the codes are rising. The veil is thinning. The timelines are splitting, and the chosen are being called not to hide, not to wait, but to embody. To stand as pillars of remembrance in a world that is forgotten. To walk with such clarity, such integrity, such frequency, that we become the new temples, the new scriptures, the new technology. We are the ones who were encoded with the keys. We are the ones who chose to forget so we could remember. We are the ones who are awakening now, not for ourselves, but for all. And that is why this journey has been so intense. That is why you've been tested so relentlessly. Because the ones who hold the light must first be broken open enough to become empty vessels for truth. And if you've made it through the fire, if you've endured the sacred isolation, the ego death, the disintegration of old timelines, then you are ready. Not to survive, not to succeed, but to serve, to lead, to build. to breathe the new life into the collective field. That is the final proof. That is the final sign. You are not just part of the chosen elite. You are the architect of what comes next. And now, the only thing left to do is live it. This next chapter is the natural evolution of everything we've uncovered. You now know you're part of the chosen elite. You've survived the sacred isolation. You've felt the divine codes stirring in your DNA. But now comes the ultimate question, the one the universe has been waiting for you to finally ask with full awareness. What am I here to do with all of this? Because the truth is, awakening isn't the end. It's the beginning. Activation is only the first spark. Once the fire is lit, once your soul comes online, once the downloads start flowing and the old self is no longer running the show, you are given a choice. Not by the world, not by society, but by your higher self, your cosmic team, your guides, your future incarnations. You are asked, now that you remember who you are, will you live like it? And this is where most people stop. This is the hidden fork in the road that the masses never talk about. Because remembering is easy compared to embodying. It's one thing to feel the frequency of your future self in meditation. It's another thing to walk as that version of you in the middle of a world still asleep. It's one thing to channel light in solitude. It's another thing to anchor it in the chaos of modern life. But this is where the chosen elite are separated from the curious seekers. Because the chosen don't just want to feel good. We want to build something real. We want to anchor heaven into earth. We want to rewire the collective field with our presence. And to do that, we must become living embodiments of higher law. So what does that look like? It means you begin to live as if the divine is watching you every second. Not out of fear, but out of reverence. You begin to speak words that echo across timelines. You begin to show up in integrity, even when no one will ever know. You begin to make every decision based on frequency, not fear. You stop asking, will this bring me success? And start asking, is this in alignment with my soul's architecture? You begin to notice how your body reacts to subtle energy. You start treating your intuition as sacred data. You no longer ignore the whispers. You realize the universe is constantly communicating with you through signs, through sensations, through synchronicities, and you learn to listen with your entire being. You begin to move with precision, not hurried, not scattered, but exact. You become a vessel of divine will. You stop needing to prove anything to anyone because your frequency speaks louder than your words ever could. And this is when you begin to see how reality bends around your embodiment. Not because you're manipulating it, but because you're resonating with the version of the world that already exists on your highest timeline. This is quantum living. This is spiritual technology in motion. This is when you realize that the future is not a destination, but a vibration, and you can tune into it at will. But here's the paradox. The more powerful you become, the more humble you must be. Because the true masters are not those who proclaim their gifts, they are those who protect them. They are those who use their power not to elevate their ego, but to elevate consciousness. They are those who understand that being chosen comes with responsibility. You can no longer play small. You can no longer waste your energy on drama, on distraction, on anything that dimmed your light in the past. You've outgrown the old versions of yourself, And now it's time to shed the final layers, not just in thought, but in action. That means you may lose more people. That means you may have to walk alone again. That means you'll have to say no to opportunities that don't match your vibration. That means you'll have to operate from a level of discernment most people around you won't understand. But that's the price of mastery. That's the cost of being fully turned on, fully aligned, fully awake in a sleeping world. And the reward? The reward is everything. Peace that cannot be shaken. Clarity that cannot be distorted. Power that cannot be stolen. You become immovable. You become untouchable not because you fight, but because you are light itself. And that's when the real mission begins. You didn't come here to awaken and then sit on your gifts. You came here to serve, to lead, to rebuild the systems that are crumbling, to bring new codes into business, into art, into education, into healing, into government, into technology, into every corner of the human experience. You came to be a bridge between worlds, to embody the divine while walking on earth, to become the living proof that a new reality is not only possible, it's inevitable. But that new world doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives through you, through your choices, through your frequency, through your devotion, through how you treat yourself when no one's looking, through how you respond to fear, to challenge, to the unknown, through how you hold your energy when everything seems to be falling apart. Because the chosen are not here to escape this world. We are here to transcend it from within. And that requires spiritual maturity. That requires emotional intelligence. That requires radical responsibility. That requires full embodiment.